What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode. Dr. Mike Axler here, PhD in kinesiology and applied physiology, professor of exercise science, and 60-plus time marathoner and ultramarathoner. I do want to welcome you all to this first episode in what I'm calling Muscle Month. It is going to be a full series dedicated to helping you build muscle smarter and not necessarily harder. If you're a lifter, a runner, a coach, or just someone who wants to gain a bit more muscle and have a more firm understanding of the physiology behind strength and performance, this month may be built for you. Skeletal muscle, as we've talked about a lot in the past on this channel, isn't necessarily about aesthetics. It's a metabolically active endocrine organ built for longevity. Skeletal muscle regulates metabolism, supports immune function, and reduces chronic disease. Too many people are training with outdated advice, if they're even training at all, or copying influencers instead of using science. In this month, we will be looking to change that. Each episode this month will break down an important piece of the muscle puzzle. Today, we'll be focusing on training for muscle growth according to the latest scientific consensus. Next week, the nutrition side of the equation. We'll be discussing protein, calories, supplements, and more. In week 3, we'll be talking about recovery, hormones, and the often ignored role of sleep and rest. And then in week 4, we will be discussing muscle and metabolism, how muscle affects longevity, insulin sensitivity, and body composition. My promise to you is that you'll get research-backed information explained in simpler terms. There's not going to be any fluff. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm just here to offer some practical strategies that you can apply right away. And if you're a coach, this may help level up your client education as well. However, I do want to ask, I have a little quick ask before we begin. If you do find this episode and this whole series helpful, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this episode with a friend who may benefit from it. Awesome. So in today's episode, we will be discussing, first off, the science of muscle growth. We'll be answering the question of what drives hypertrophy at the cellular level as well as the training level. We'll discuss the roles of progressive tension overload, training volume, and mechanical stress, as well as why too many lifters focus on the wrong metrics and how they can fix these to continue to progress more efficiently. In the second session, we'll be talking about how much protein we need. We'll be discussing daily protein targets for muscle gain based on the latest meta-analyses, why more isn't always better, and when it might be with regard for protein, as well as protein timing and distribution, and if that really matters at all in the conversation. In our third section, we'll be discussing why consistency is arguably the most important factor in determining your muscle gain, and this is going to be my favorite, as I always remind myself, consistency wins. We'll discuss why perfect programs do not matter if you cannot follow them, the psychology and physiology of long-term progress, and how to build a simple and sustainable training framework. Fourth, we will stop debating training splits. We'll be discussing training splits like push-pull legs, the bro split, and full body splits. We'll discuss why individualization matters more than methodology, and also what the research says about frequency and weekly training volumes. Fifth, we'll discuss mistakes which may be sabotaging your muscle growth. We'll discuss things like program hopping, lack of intensity, and overtraining traps. We'll discuss under-recovery and nutritional gaps that kill your gains, and the biggest myths keeping smart people from building muscle. And lastly, we will be discussing how to build a science-backed roadmap to hypertrophy. Step by step, how to structure your training week, nutrition fundamentals for lean muscle gain, and simple, actionable takeaways that you can implement today. Awesome. So with that, if you are excited for this episode, I'm ready. So let's crack on with this thing. So what is hypertrophy? Let's talk about some of the deep science here that we talk about at the university level, and let's boil this down, which is easy enough to understand, and so you can begin to implement this. Hypertrophy refers to the increase in muscle size, typically measured as an increase in cross-sectional area. This results from a combination of muscle fiber enlargement and intracellular changes in protein content. Research consistently shows that hypertrophy results from a positive net protein balance, meaning more synthesis than breakdown. And this is going to be driven by resistance training and adequate nutrition. Now, there are two types of hypertrophy. There's myofibrillar and sarcoplasmic. For the former, myofibrillar hypertrophy involves the growth of contractile proteins such as actin and myosin within the sarcomere of each skeletal muscle cell or myocyte, which directly contributes to increases in force production. Actin and myosin are the two main contractile proteins in muscle, and in the case of myofibrillar hypertrophy, these two proteins not only get bigger in size, but they also get stronger, which enables increases in force production. Sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, number 2, on the other hand, involves increases in muscle cell volume due to stored glycogen, water, and non-contractile components, which do contribute more to muscle size than muscular strength. Further on the types of hypertrophy, myofibrillar first. So we can think of this as denser, stronger muscle fibers. Myofibrillar hypertrophy enhances strength and power due to increased contractile units per fiber. This is going to be typical in lower rep, higher load training programs. For example, around 3 to 6 reps, around 80 to 90% of your 1RM. And it is heavily driven by mechanical tension, which signals pathways like mTOR to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. For sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, you can think of this as increases in stored glycogen, fluid, and metabolites. Sarcoplasmic hypertrophy results in a visibly larger muscle without equivalent increases in strength. This is common in higher rep, moderate load protocols, such as around 10 to 20 reps per set, that emphasize metabolic stress and glycogen accumulation. Studies show that sarcoplasmic volume can increase disproportionately to contractile proteins during high volume training. And if you've ever done the copy and paste bodybuilding style training, which calls for 3 to 4 sets for each muscle group in the rep ranges of 10 to 12 reps, you are mainly targeting sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. And it's not to say that you won't get stronger vis-a-vis being able to increasingly push, pull, and press more weight. It just means that your muscles will get bigger disproportionately to the amount of strength you can gain. Some common misconceptions. If you ever heard of toning is often used in mainstream fitness to mean looking leaner, but physiologically, it's simply muscle hypertrophy paired with fat loss. You can't tone a muscle without growing it to some degree, and further, there's also no unique rep range. Resistance training that causes hypertrophy, combined with proper nutrition to reduce body fat, is what people are really seeking in order to enhance their body compositions. Another misconception around hypertrophy is that you can isolate one type of hypertrophy training completely, and this is false. It is nearly impossible to train exclusively for only myofibrillar or sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. Most programs cause a combination of both, and this is a good thing. The emphasis can, however, shift depending on training variables like load, reps, and sets, which we'll be discussing more along in this episode. Hybrid training styles, or periodized models, if you want to call it that, blend both types effectively, which is why they're often superior for both size and strength gains. This is also a contributing reason as to why doing heavy top sets on the compound movements before backing off and hitting lighter sets, in addition to isolation movements, can be advantageous. You are better able to stimulate more strength and hypertrophy stimuli when you look to fail safely in that 3 to 6 rep range on, say, squats, deadlifts, and bench presses before hitting leg extensions like curls, bicep curls, tricep extensions, etc. in the 10 to 12 rep range. All right, now let's get on to volume, frequency, and intensity. Volume first. Volume is going to be the primary driver of hypertrophy. Training volume is calculated by multiplying sets by reps by load, and it is the most important variable which drives hypertrophy. Research consistently details that volume increases total mechanical tension and time under tension, which are both contributing stimuli for muscle growth to occur. While both intensity and frequency do matter, consistently applying sufficient volume is the cornerstone of a hypertrophy-focused program. Meaning, if you want to continue to increase the size of your muscles, you'll need to get into the gym and consistently train hard, not killing it once or twice a week, but 3 to 4 times per week or more is what's going to make the longest lasting positive adaptations. Meta-analyses like that from Schoenfeld and colleagues show a clear dose response. As training volume increases up to a point, hypertrophy also increases. For instance, 10 plus weekly sets per muscle group lead to greater growth than fewer than 5 sets per muscle group. However, this relationship isn't linear forever, as extremely high volumes can impair recovery and lead to diminishing returns or even overtraining. Most evidence supports a quote-unquote sweet spot of 10 to 20 weekly sets per muscle group for maximizing hypertrophy, especially in trained individuals. Beginners can see results at the lower end of this range, while advanced lifters often benefit from gradually periodized increases upwards of 20 sets or more with sufficient recovery. And now it's also important to discuss training to failure and leaving some reps in the tank. Training to failure may increase hypertrophy in some contexts, but it's not necessary and may impair recovery if used excessively. Studies like that of Helms et al. In 2018 showed that leaving between 1 and 3 reps in reserve, so RIR, produces similar or even superior gains over time. Failure should be used strategically, not constantly. Stopping 1 to 3 reps short of failure allows you to accumulate more high-quality training volume over time. And everyone will be different on this. It is important to follow the science as a guideline, but really take into account your life. Life stress does accumulate. So while in some slower and more boring weeks, you can easily hit upwards of 15 to 20 sets per muscle group, other weeks, you may not be able to go over 10 because your sleep and recovery were compromised. And that's okay. The important thing is consistency and being honest with yourself based on how you are recovering, both locally, meaning within target muscles, as well as systemically, meaning full body. Next comes the question of frequency. How often should you train? We now know that training a muscle group twice per week consistently outperforms once weekly sessions for hypertrophy, likely due to more frequent stimulation of muscle protein synthesis. This aligns with the understanding that muscle protein synthesis returns to baseline within around 36 to 48 hours post-training, especially in trained individuals. However, it is important to spread volume across the week. Rather than cramming all weekly sets into one session, spreading volume across multiple days can improve training quality and recovery. Research shows that splitting sets across the week can lead to better fatigue management and performance per set. This can also minimize DOMS, or delayed onset muscle soreness, and allow for higher quality effort and movement patterns during each workout. And The best training split is the one that distributes volume effectively and fits your schedule. Full body and upper-lower splits are often ideal for hitting muscle groups multiple times per week while balancing recovery. Advanced bodybuilders may use some bro splits effectively, but for most people, higher frequency routines are more efficient and sustainable for hypertrophy. And we'll be discussing training splits a little later on in this episode. And lastly, for the intensity component, let's talk about load and RPE, or rating of perceived exertion. Muscle growth can occur across a wide load spectrum from as low as 30% of your 1RM to as high as 85% of your 1RM, as long as sets are taken close to failure and volume is matched. And for context, 30% of your 1RM is roughly equivalent to around 25 to 35 plus reps, and 85% of your 1RM is equivalent to around 4 to 6 reps. So if you aim to lift hard and with proper form, within the 5 to 30 rep range, the research does suggest that this is sufficient for increasing skeletal muscle hypertrophy. This challenges the myth that only lifting heavy builds muscle, as even lighter loads can be effective, especially for increasing metabolic stress and motor unit recruitment. Recent research from Morton and colleagues show that proximity to failure is more important than the load itself when it comes to hypertrophy. Whether you're lifting 30% or 80% of your 1RM, meaning as light as a weight that allows you to lift 30 reps, or as heavy as a weight that allows you to lift 5 reps, the closer you take that muscle or muscle group, in the case of a compound movement, to failure, the greater the motor unit recruitment. That said, moderate loads of around 60 to 80% of your 1RM, so around 6 to 12 reps, which you've probably heard of and probably have been lifting in this range before, do often provide the best trade-off between mechanical tension and fatigue management. One helpful tool that you can use is the RIR, or the reps in reserve model. Using RIR can help lifters regulate intensity without burning out. A study from Zordos et al. Confirms that stopping 1 to 3 reps shy of failure is just as effective for hypertrophy as going to full failure, while improving long-term recovery and adherence. The reps in reserve system also teaches lifters to self-monitor effort more accurately over time, making it a valuable tool for both beginners and advanced trainees. And this can take some time, so just be patient with it. A large number of my beginner clients who I trained will focus on their form, which I really harp on, but will look at me after like the 10th rep with a casual look on their face and ask when they should stop. And I have to tell them they can stop when it gets hard. And once lifters develop that mind-muscle connection, or the neuromuscular connectivity, which we'll discuss, then they are able to really feel each rep and determine how and when to push accordingly. Awesome. Let's go on to muscle protein synthesis and discuss what it is. Alrighty, so muscle protein synthesis, or MPS, which you may have heard of before, I've talked a lot about on this channel, is the biological process by which the body creates new muscle proteins to repair and build tissue after exercise. It's the cornerstone of hypertrophy and is regulated by both mechanical stress, so training, and nutritional inputs, particularly protein intake. And before we move forwards, every one of us is constantly going through muscle protein synthesis. Whether you got to the gym today or not, as we all experience what we'll detail next, which is muscle protein breakdown by just being alive. So if you perhaps don't think this applies to you, it very much does. We need strong muscles just to be alive each day. So with that in mind, what is more is that muscle protein synthesis also just does not occur in isolation. It's also competing all of the time with muscle protein breakdown, or MPB. For muscle growth to occur, our bodies must synthesize more protein than it breaks down over time, such that a net positive protein balance occurs when muscle protein synthesis exceeds muscle protein breakdown, leading to muscle hypertrophy. This is why both training and nutritional strategies need to target both boosting muscle protein synthesis while limiting muscle protein breakdown. Next, how training stimulates muscle protein synthesis. A single session of resistance training can elevate muscle protein synthesis by 50 to 150% for upwards of 48 hours post-exercise, depending on the training load and the individual's training status. However, the spike typically returns to baseline within 24 to 36 hours in trained individuals. Untrained individuals, however, may see longer lasting muscle protein synthesis responses of upwards of 48 hours, while trained athletes adapt more quickly and may require higher volumes or novel stimuli to maximize muscle protein synthesis. In both groups, however, it is important to note or just remember, as a reminder, that training to or near failure is still important to maximize results. All right, let's now talk about nutrition and muscle protein synthesis. Leucine, a branched chain amino acid, acts as a trigger for muscle protein synthesis via the mTOR pathway. And if you're curious about leucine, the branched chain amino acids, complete proteins, mTOR, and all the rest of it, I've done several videos on that specifically, and we'll be tackling that more in coming videos. Around 2.5 to 3 grams of leucine per meal, typically found in around 25 to 30 grams of high quality protein, is needed to maximize the muscle protein synthesis response. While total daily protein is the main driver of muscle growth, consuming protein around workouts may enhance recovery and muscle protein synthesis slightly, especially in the fasted state. A good rule of thumb I like to remind myself, as well as my clients and my students, is that a protein-rich meal before and after training can be a helpful insurance policy to make sure you're both fueling up for and recovering adequately from the hard training session you put in. And for the amount of protein needed for hypertrophy, meta-analyses like that from Morton and colleagues suggest that consuming between 1.6 and 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day maximizes muscle growth in resistance trained individuals. Intakes beyond this range offer little added benefit for most people, but more on this to come. Alrighty, let's talk about how age impacts muscle growth. As we age, muscle becomes less responsive to the anabolic effects of both resistance training and protein intake, a phenomenon called anabolic resistance. Older adults may need nearly double the leucine or protein dose per meal to achieve the same muscle protein synthesis response seen in younger adults. Aging preferentially reduces fast twitch or type 2 muscle fibers, which are key for strength and power. This is a contributor to declines in mobility, balance, and functional independence as people age. Aging is also marked by reduced satellite cell activity. Satellite cells help repair and regenerate muscle after exercise, and they become less numerous and less active with age. This compromises muscle repair and adaptive growth in response to resistance training. And lastly are the hormonal changes. Older adults experience reductions in anabolic hormones such as testosterone, growth hormone, and IGF-1, all of which regulate muscle protein synthesis. These hormonal changes reduce the muscle's capacity to grow and recover unless counteracted by targeted lifestyle strategies. So what older adults can do about this? Number one is have higher protein intakes per meal. So to overcome this anabolic resistance, older adults may benefit from consuming anywhere from 30 to 40 grams of high quality protein per meal, ideally spaced evenly throughout the day. This approach better stimulates muscle protein synthesis and supports muscle retention and growth. Second, on what older adults can do is increase the resistance training intensity. Training with sufficient intensity, so close to failure, even if it's with lighter loads, has been shown to increase muscle protein synthesis in older adults despite age-related resistance. It is important to note that high effort sets, not just heavy weights, are the keys for adaptation. Third, older adults can benefit from more frequent training, as this may help. Training muscle groups more frequently, so 3 or more times per week, may help sustain elevated muscle protein synthesis and better combat age-related muscle loss. Frequent training also provides more opportunities to stimulate satellite cells and preserve motor unit function. And lastly, older adults can try supplementing with creatine monohydrate in combination with leucine-rich protein like whey, as this can amplify muscle protein synthesis and improve muscle mass and strength in older adults. This duo supports both intracellular energy and anabolic signaling pathways like mTOR. Awesome. So let's now get into some practical applications and some programming tips that you can start using today. So some sample weekly splits. We have 3 here to discuss. Number 1 is going to be the upper-lower 4 times per week split. An upper-lower split is ideal for training each major muscle group twice per week, which research shows is optimal for hypertrophy and strength gains. This setup allows for recovery between sets while still generating adequate training volume. Next, we have a push-pull leg split performed 5 to 6 times per week, as this allows for increased training frequency and volume, which are both key drivers of muscle growth, as we know by now. It is especially effective for intermediate to advanced lifters with solid recovery habits. And lastly, you can also do a full body split around 3 times per week. Full body workouts done 3 times per week are highly effective for beginners, allowing them to learn movement patterns, recover fully, and stimulate muscle protein synthesis more frequently. It's also easier to sustain and build consistently with fewer total sessions. All right, so some key takeaways for some high quality results. Number 1 is to focus on progressive overload. Gradually increasing weight, reps, or intensity is essential for muscle growth and strength adaptations. Without it, the body really has no reason to continue adapting, leading to plateaus. A more subjective rule of thumb I like to go by is, if you're consistently taking your sets sufficiently close to failure within the 5 to 30 rep range, then you are working hard and progressively overloading. When this isn't the case is when people just sit around on machines at the gym and do a few reps, they stop, and you see that they're not really struggling or working hard, and their heart rate and blood pressure isn't increasing, they're not sweating. So given you do go within 1 to 3 reps shy of failure, even if you don't want to track exact weight and reps, you'll be overloading sufficiently. Further, stick with a program for at least 6 to 8 weeks. Muscle adaptation takes time, like anything takes time. Staying consistent with the same program for 6 to 8 weeks allows your body to accumulate enough training stimulus to generate measurable strength and hypertrophy outcomes. And lastly, measure your progress. Tracking progress using multiple indicators such as increases in strength, total volume lifted, visual physique changes, and reduced fatigue gives a fuller picture of improvement. Relying on just one metric like scale weight can be misleading. Alrighty, so to conclude, what we learned today is, first, muscle growth is equal to progressive tension overload plus volume plus sufficient protein. Progressive overload and volume are the mechanical drivers of hypertrophy. To build muscle, we must consistently challenge our muscles with more tension over time by increasing weights, reps, or improving technique, while also accumulating enough weekly training volume. We brought up in today's episode that Schoenfeld and colleagues reported that mechanical tension, muscle damage, and metabolic stress are the three key mechanisms behind hypertrophy, with volume being one of the strongest predictors of growth when training close to failure. Further, adequate protein intake is the biochemical support system for muscle repair and growth. Research consistently shows that consuming around 1.6 to 2.2 grams of protein per pound of body weight daily is optimal for muscle protein synthesis in trained individuals. Further, do not get lost in the weeds. We know that consistency beats perfection every single time. A program that's, good enough but followed consistently will always outperform the perfect plan that's abandoned after 2 weeks. The best results come from showing up, not from constantly tweaking details. We know that physiological changes take weeks and months, not just days. Far too many people fail because they switch programs or strategies too quickly. Our bodies adapt slowly, but they do adapt. And the results compound when we stay consistent over time, even if everything is not perfect. And lastly, science supports multiple paths, but the principles always remain the same. There is no single best training split or method. What matters most is applying the core principles of progressive overload, sufficient volume, adequate recovery, and proper nutrition. Whether you're doing a full body 3 times per week split or a 6 times per week push-pull leg split, you are on the right track if these fundamentals are met. And meta-analyses show similar hypertrophy outcomes across a variety of training splits, so long as total weekly volume is matched. Individualization matters, but science offers guardrails. You can adopt training methods to suit lifestyle, preferences, and goals, but you still need to respect the foundational science. Muscle does not grow from novelty. It grows from applied principles executed over time. Awesome. So with that, I do want to thank you for tuning in to this first episode of Muscle Month. Our next episode, as we said, is going to be all devoted to the nutrition side of the equation. So protein, calories, micronutrients, and more to help support your hypertrophy. If you did like this episode, please like, subscribe, and share this with a friend who might need to hear it, as well as scrolling on down and subscribing to both my Substack, where I do more in-depth articles, where I cite all the research, my podcast, where I talk a little bit more about research, and then my Instagram as well, where I do little tidbits throughout the day to keep everybody on track. It's about that time of day again where I'm going to go hit the gym. I hope you will too. Start working on your hypertrophy right this second. And with that, consistency wins, and enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you all in the next episode.